Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at supply chains,
Okay.
but not just any supply chains. We're going to be looking at supply chains and how graph technology is changing things up.
Right.
Um, I'm really excited about this one. I've been reading a lot about this, and it seems like there's some really interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, it's funny because it's not something that you would normally think of as being like super interesting,
Yeah.
supply chains.
Right.
But when you start looking at how graph technology is being used to like really understand these complex systems, it's
Right.
actually really fascinating.
Yeah, so for our listeners out there, maybe just like a real quick, like what is graph technology?
Sure.
Like how would you explain that to someone who's never heard of it before?
So basically, imagine a map, right?
Uh,
You've got cities and you've got roads connecting those cities.
Okay.
In graph technology, you've got what are called nodes and edges.
Okay.
And so the cities would be the nodes and the roads would be the edges. And so in a supply chain, you could have suppliers as nodes, you could have factories as nodes, warehouses, all these different things.
Okay.
And then the edges represent the relationships between them. So like who supplies who or, where things are being shipped to.
Okay. So it's basically like a visual representation of all those different connections in a supply chain.
Exactly.
Okay. But I mean, haven't companies been like drawing these kinds of diagrams for years? Like what's so different about graph technology?
Yeah, so, people have been trying to visualize supply chains for a long time, but the problem is traditional methods like, using spreadsheets or just like basic diagrams, they don't really work very well when you have a really complex supply chain.
Okay.
You get like a million different lines and it becomes really hard to see what's going on.
So it's like too much information overload. You
Yeah.
can't really make sense of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so graph technology uses these specialized databases that are specifically designed to store and analyze relationships. And so you can actually see patterns and connections that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
So it's not just about pretty pictures. It's about actually like analyzing that data and understanding the relationships.
Exactly. And the cool thing is that it's not just about like static analysis. You can actually run simulations and you can see how changes in one part of the supply chain are going to affect other parts.
Okay, now that sounds really powerful. So this isn't just like a theoretical thing. Are companies actually using this stuff in the real world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So like one example is Jaguar Land Rover.
Okay.
They were having problems with supplier delays, and it was really impacting their production.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine that would be a nightmare in the car industry.
Exactly. And so they implemented graph technology to map out their entire supply network.
Okay.
And they were able to use that to identify alternative suppliers and actually resequence their production.
So basically, they use graph technology to dodge a bullet.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. But I bet it wasn't cheap to implement.
Well, it's an investment, but the payoff can be huge.
Okay.
Like for Jaguar Land Rover, they estimated that it helped them prevent delays for something like 400,000 vehicles.
Wow.
And they said that it added about 100 million pounds to their bottom line.
Okay, so that's a pretty good return on investment.
Yeah.
Are there other companies out there that are using it in such a impactful way?
Yeah. So another really interesting example is Boston Scientific.
Okay.
They make medical devices.
Oh, wow. High stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And they use graph technology to track product quality.
Okay.
So they can trace defects back to the root cause.
Okay.
And even predict potential problems before they happen.
So it's all about preventative measures.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so we've been talking about these graph databases, but how are they actually different from the tools that companies have been using for years, like ERPs and stuff like that?
Right. So traditional supply chain tools like ERPs, they're really good at managing individual transactions.
Yeah.
How much inventory do you have in a specific warehouse? Or tracking the status of an order.
Okay.
But they're not so good at connecting the dots and seeing the big picture.
So it's like you can see the trees, but you can't see the forest.
Exactly. And so graph technology allows you to zoom out and see the entire landscape of your supply chain. And that's where you get those really valuable insights.
Okay, so it's about getting that holistic view.
Exactly.
Okay, well, this is all really interesting, but I'm wondering, how do you even begin to build one of these supply chain graphs?
Right.
Is it just plug in some software and let it do its magic?
I wish it were that easy.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot of work involved.
Hmm.
First of all, you got to get data from all your different systems.
Okay.
You might have data in your procurement system, your manufacturing system, your logistics system,
Right.
and you got to bring all that together.
So it's like a big data integration project.
Yeah, and then you got to clean it up,
Yeah.
make sure it's all consistent. And then you got to figure out how to model that data in a way that makes sense for your specific supply chain. You know, you got to define the nodes and the edges and the types of relationships that you want to analyze.
So it's not just about the technology. It's about understanding your own supply chain.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a pretty significant undertaking.
It definitely is.
And I imagine there are some challenges involved.
Oh, there definitely are.
Well, let's talk about those challenges in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned, folks. Okay, deep divers, welcome back. So we've talked about how graph technology can be a really powerful tool for understanding supply chains.
Yeah.
But as with anything, I'm sure there's some challenges that come along with it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
You know, it's a really powerful technology,
Yeah.
but it's not something that you can just like plug in and it'll solve all your problems.
Right. So what are some of the biggest challenges that companies face when they're trying to implement graph technology?
Well, one of the first things is scalability. You know, supply chains can be incredibly complex.
Yeah.
You might have thousands of suppliers, millions of products, and all these different relationships between them.
Right.
And so as that graph grows, it can become really challenging to manage.
So it's like a data overload problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so early graph databases, they really struggled to keep up with that kind of complexity.
Okay.
But luckily, there have been a lot of advances in graph database technology.
Okay.
And now we have these things called distributed graph databases.
Okay.
And basically what that means is that you can spread the workload across multiple machines.
So it's like having a team of computers working together.
Exactly. And so that allows you to handle those really complex queries and simulations.
Okay, so scalability sounds like it's not really a problem anymore.
Well, it's still something that you need to think about.
Okay.
But there are solutions out there.
Okay, so what other challenges are there?
Well, implementation can be a challenge.
Okay.
You know, it's not just about buying some software. You need to think about how you're going to get data from all your different systems and
Yeah.
how you're going to clean that data,
Right.
and then how you're going to model it in the graph database.
So it's like a whole data integration and data modeling project.
Yeah, and then there's also the learning curve.
Okay.
You know, graph databases, they often use specialized query languages
Okay.
and concepts that can be quite different from traditional SQL or spreadsheets.
So you need to have people on your team who actually know how to use this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And you also need to think about change management.
Okay.
You know, anytime you implement a new technology, there's going to be some resistance from people who are used to doing things the old way.
Right. So it's about getting buy-in from everyone who's going to be affected by this change.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are some of the challenges, but what about the benefits?
Right.
Like, what are some of the things that companies are seeing when they successfully implement graph technology?
Well, one of the biggest benefits is improved visibility. You know, imagine being able to see your entire supply chain in real time.
Wow.
You know, you can see where all your products are.
Right.
You can see where your suppliers are.
Right.
You can see potential bottlenecks.
Okay.
And you can even see the ripple effects of disruptions.
So like if there's a port strike somewhere, you can immediately see how that's going to affect your supply chain.
Exactly. And so that allows you to be much more proactive.
Okay.
You can start looking for alternative suppliers or alternative routes.
So you're not just reacting to problems after they happen. You're actually trying to prevent them.
Exactly.
That's amazing. What other benefits are there?
Well, another big one is risk mitigation.
Okay.
So graph technology can help you identify hidden risks in your supply chain.
Okay, like what kind of hidden risks?
Well, let's say you source a critical component from multiple suppliers.
Okay.
You might think you're diversified,
Right.
but what if all of those suppliers rely on the same sub-supplier for a key raw material?
Oh, I see. So it's like a single point of failure.
Yeah. Exactly. And so graph technology can help you see those connections,
Okay.
and that allows you to take steps to mitigate that risk.
So you can find alternative sub-suppliers.
Exactly. Or you can start stockpiling that raw material.
Okay, so we're talking about like avoiding some major disruptions.
Yeah.
Wow, this is really interesting. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more about like specific examples of how companies are using graph technology.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some case studies in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, deep divers, welcome back for part 3 of our deep dive into graph technology and supply chains. And, we've talked about some of the challenges and some of the benefits, but I think now is a good time to actually look at some specific examples of how companies are using this stuff in the real world.
Yeah, so let's start with something that everyone can relate to: online shopping.
Okay.
So companies like Amazon and Alibaba, they're using graph technology to optimize their logistics networks.
Okay, so we're talking about like getting those packages from the warehouse to my doorstep as quickly as possible. Yeah, exactly.
How does graph technology actually help with that?
So it's all about finding the most efficient path through a really complex network. You have to think about things like traffic conditions, warehouse locations, delivery time windows,
Right.
and even weather forecasts.
Wow. So it's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah. And graph technology allows you to solve that puzzle in real time. So
Okay.
those delivery trucks are constantly getting updated with the best route to take.
So they're not just like following a predetermined route. They're actually like adapting to the conditions on the fly.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's all about speed and efficiency.
Yeah. And it's also about making sure that those promises of like next day delivery are actually met.
Right. Because if you're promising people that they're going to get their package the next day, you better be able to deliver.
Yeah. And graph technology can help you do that.
Okay. So we're talking about e-commerce, but I'm guessing that this technology is being used in other industries as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So another big area where graph technology is making a big impact is in manufacturing.
Yep.
Remember how we talked about Jaguar Land Rover using it to deal with supplier disruptions?
Yeah.
Well, that's just one example.
Okay.
Graph technology can also be used to optimize production workflows
Okay.
and identify bottlenecks.
So it's like making the factory run more smoothly.
Exactly. And it can also help companies simulate the impact of potential disruptions.
Okay, so like what if a machine breaks down or a supplier goes offline?
Exactly. You can use graph technology to see how that's going to affect your production.
Okay.
And you can start looking for ways to mitigate that impact.
So it's all about like being prepared for the unexpected.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about e-commerce, we talked about manufacturing. Are there any other industries where graph technology is being used?
Yeah, so another really interesting area is healthcare.
Okay.
So graph databases are being used to analyze patient data
Okay.
and identify patterns in disease outbreaks.
So it's like helping us understand how diseases spread.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it can also be used to accelerate drug discovery.
Okay.
You can use graph technology to connect the dots between symptoms, medical histories, genetic information,
Right.
and that can help you develop more effective therapies.
Okay, so it's like taking a more holistic view of healthcare.
Exactly.
Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the challenges of implementing graph technology,
Yeah.
we've talked about the benefits, and we've looked at some specific examples of how companies are using it.
Yeah.
But I think the big takeaway here is that graph technology is a really powerful tool.
Right.
And it's only going to become more important as the world becomes more complex and more interconnected.
Yeah, and I think for anyone who's listening who's interested in learning more about this, I would say just start exploring.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. There are online communities, there are consulting firms that specialize in this stuff.
Right.
And, just start asking questions.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to experiment.
All right, well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Thanks.